What Hegseth, moving on to our next topic, does not want you or I or us to know is that a lot of people that he is leading understand how bad he is and how bad Trump is. And some of them are so fed up, they're resigning. Now, I'm going to weave into the segment. After I covered the speech that Trump delivered for the Navy 250 celebration, that was wildly political and hoo-yah Navy. Obviously, Melania Trump said this. What, Melania?
Hoo-yah Navy.
There we go. Thank you, Melania. And all the stuff that we're used to now in the way that they try to politicize the military in really dangerous ways. I had a fan of the show reach out who was at the speech, who's in the Navy, and who we ended up having like a hour-long Zoom call just discussing everything that he's seen. It had to be off the record, obviously. Who knows what Hegseth would do if he found out the name of the guy. But told me a lot of things that in one way were disturbing about how many people are disturbed within the military with what Trump's doing. But on the other front was kind of hopeful. Okay, so with some of the worst ideas you could imagine that the now War Department would want to do, if it got bad enough, I think we can have faith in military members putting their oath to the Constitution above their chain of command with Trump at the top of it. And that's led to even a Guardian piece, Marine Colonel quits after 24 years, citing concern for future of U.S. under Trump. 24 years. And this is really difficult for people to do. It's so engraved correctly into service members' minds that you don't get political publicly because we want a military that isn't political. But then what does that mean whenever the commander-in-chief is trying to politicize you in some federal overreach, turning you against your own citizens types of ways? And I think at some point it takes the courage to do this, which was he wrote an essay discussing his horror with what he's seeing. A former U.S. Marine Corps colonel and combat veteran has said that after 24 years of service, he resigned from the military because of Trump, citing what he described as the U.S. president's contempt for the Constitution. Doug Krugman left his role in the military on September 30th, coinciding with the day that Donald Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth delivered controversial partisan addresses to U.S. military leaders brought to a special meeting in Virginia. No fat generals, that one, and no dudes in dresses, that one also. I gave up my career out of my concern of our country's future, Krugman wrote in an op-ed for the Washington Post. He even warned of collapse of the conventional U.S. government system. Powerful. I'll read a little bit more in a second here, but you see this headline, 24-year Marine vet pins powerful Washington Post op-ed saying he resigned because of President Trump. And as this is happening, an example of just the contempt for our Constitution that our current top leaders of the military, just being Hegseth and Trump mainly, that's manifesting with their contempt against the press and these new rules that even right-wing outlets weren't willing to sign on to, that demand you don't report on unauthorized information by the Pentagon. So you can't report on whatever you find newsworthy, and instead it has to be just Pentagon propaganda. And a former general, right? Yeah, a retired general went on Fox News and sounded the alarm about this.
Kind of simplified it there than what's on the paper. I covered the Pentagon for 6.5 years. I covered the White House for 4 years. I covered the Pentagon when you were there.
Yeah, right.
And we knew not to, you don't walk into the tank, and the classified areas are off limits. We obviously were always trying to get the story from different elements, and there was a freedom, but everybody had badges with them. At the White House, I never walked into the Oval Office or the Situation Room. These are stipulations that essentially are changing the dynamic about how to get information and how they disseminate information.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like the whole story is being told to our viewers here. What they're really doing, they want to spoon feed information to the journalists, and that will be their story. That's not journalism. Journalism is going out and finding the story and getting all the facts to support it. And no one's going to walk in and bang on a door of a four-star general or senior civilian policy leader in the Pentagon. I never had that, but I did have journalists chasing a story of something that was going on in the Army, and those things were legitimate. And if anything, what would frustrate us in times is we didn't beat you to it. And something bad is happening, and we're getting our act together to do it. And sometimes, well, let's wait a couple of days before we talk about that, and you guys are on it. And that's journalism.
And we know the stipulations about classified information, and if there are leaks or there are situations, there are investigations many times that lead to that. But in the day-to-day, for military families, for military, us being in the Pentagon is usually an asset.
Yeah, I have never, ever seen it. I mean, when I was a four-star general, I insisted that all our new brigadier generals get a class.
And he goes on to talk about just the reverence for the media and coaching his underlings on the importance of seeing the press as crucial to what you're doing and how you speak to the American people, how information gets out. But crucial to that is that they have the independence to report on what they want to report on, but also the access to do so. Because, of course, these reporters who did not sign on to the pledge that Hegseth was demanding, so he revoked all their press passes, they could still report on whatever they want now outside the Pentagon, but they won't have the access that they previously did. So it's punishing them for not swearing allegiance to Hegseth. And it's actions like that and the overreach that Trump is trying to force the military into engaging in, and the rhetoric from Trump and so much more that leads to people reaching out from my audience saying, here are my concerns, but please don't put me on the record. And then that now veteran going on the record with the Washington Post op-ed to speak out against what's going on. So I think it's hopeful that people are, even in the military, seeing what's happening, and that they will do what they can in whatever ways that they feel able to abide by their constitutional oath above all else. He quietly urged other military personnel, the piece goes on about Krugman, to reflect on their own positions. They should be confident in questioning possibly immoral or illegal orders, remembering they're responsible for their own actions and knowing others are asking the same questions. If they have doubts about their orders, they are not alone, Krugman added. So that's the hopeful part. And now, because of Fox News, Newsmax, CNN, Associated Press, etc., not signing on to this Pentagon pledge, they've all been kicked out. They don't have their Pentagon access. And do you want to know who does? So here's now your new press corps in the Pentagon. The Federalist, the Epic Times, OAN, Turkish newspaper Akşam, 3 individuals from the Turkish state-run Anadolu Agency, 2 Turkish freelancers. How much is Turkey doing?
This is Turkey time. This is now we're talking Turkey.
A reporter from the Australian, an Afghan freelancer, and 3 lesser-known operations, AWPS News, the India Globe, and a blog called USA Journal Korea. Congrats to our new in-house Pentagon press corps. Those are the people who are going to be briefed by the Pentagon spokespeople. All right, a question here from the Turkish outlet. All right, cool. All right, here's a question from the Turkish outlet. I report, do we have anyone from Turkey in the background? They're going to have the best. And then these are all just going to be spokespeople for the Pentagon because they can't report on things that are unauthorized, which is insane. That doesn't mean classified, just not approved. Steven Crowder responded, like a lunatic, do you care about what you said you cared about? Press? The importance of uplifting the press? Access isn't a right, he says. It's a privilege. Pete Hegseth just pulled off the impossible. He made the media stop infiltrating the Pentagon voluntarily. Infiltrating? That's what the press is for. How else are we... You think they would have this same stance if it were Kamala doing this? If Kamala brought out of retirement General Mark Milley. And General Mark Milley was the Secretary of Trans Fence. And they said everyone has to sign on to not reporting on things that we don't like, essentially. You think they would be like, yeah, pulled off the unthinkable. The press has been infiltrating the Pentagon for too long. That's never really, I mean, we want the Pentagon to be infiltrated.